Let's get right into the discussion, ladies and gentlemen. This topic is on Easternization. We already heard some perspectives on it. And I welcome our four panelists to this discussion. We will be discussing various aspects of Easternization. It's a difficult concept because it implies that it's something monolithic, which it may not be. It implies there was something before it, Westernization, which may not be. So we've asked our speakers to think broadly, think in a philosophical sense, as well as think about strategies. So it's meant to be both practical and somewhat futuristic. So to start with, I'm going to invite Cedrik Neike. Cedrik is on the managing board of Siemens, where he has spent many years, before that many years in Cisco Systems, the electronics company, educated at UCL, INSEAD, LSE, all very fine institutions, none of which I went to. And he will, but they're still okay, and he's going to discuss a certain fundamental conflict that he will explain, which brings the confluence of the rise in energy demand with the need for green. Over to you, Cedrik.
Absolutely. So, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honor to be here. And I'm just going to refer to the previous speakers. The problem we have is exactly that problem, that we have to rethink the way the world's going. On one hand, we have 1.4 billion people which don't have access to energy or electricity today. And we have another 1 billion people which are going to join the population over the next 20 years. If this population, if these 2.4 billion people, which mainly will be in Asia, consume energy the same way we do it, we all have a problem. So what is the answer? And you ask us to be philosophical. And we are thinking of, we call it the 3 Ds at Siemens. The first one is decarbonization is happening. Whatever the mix will be, if it's gas, if it's also solar or wind, decarbonization is happening, and it's happening at a tremendous speed, much faster than actually a lot of us have predicted, in terms of, if you look at the prices, solar or wind are being sort of deployed even in the UAE or in Saudi or in India today. So the first one, if we believe that decarbonization is happening, the second step will be is that this way this energy is going to be distributed and produced is much, much, much more decentralized. Very much like the telco industry I come from, which was very centralized, and with the internet got decentralized. Renewable energy is extremely decentralized, and I'll give you an example. Germany had in 1990 1,000 power plants and 4 mathematicians which calculated how much energy all of you needed. Now in 2017, we have 1.7 million power producers, we call them prosumers, which put energy into the grid. So it's a completely different way this energy network is being created, and we have to build much, much smarter, much more intelligent grids. So the first one is, we have to be decarbonized. The second one, it's going to be much more decentralized. And the third one, we will have to go digital. The one thing, there's a couple of things I like, but the thing which stuck with me is that there is no way you're going to be able to balance demand and supply without using digital technology, using connectivity. We in Siemens simulated what it would mean to have 30 to 80% renewable energy in Germany. And if we call it the heartbeat becomes extremely intermittent. Because energy is being produced in the north of Germany and being consumed in the south. It's being produced in certain parts when there's sun, and there's not too much sun in Germany. So we really have an issue going forward. So we need digital technology, storage technology to be actually address it. So my way, and you ask us to, what are the things, is we need to connect 2.4 billion people to electricity. We need to connect them decarbonized. Siemens has committed to be decarbonized by 2030, but be carbon neutral. This will be decentral, and we will have to be massively digital. And this brings us to the second one. In order to be able to do this, we have to work together. So we are using changes we had in Germany. We're using changes we're seeing in China. If you look at how China is basically embracing sort of the scale in which we put renewable energy in place, or the UAE, we have to bring together this knowledge we have on balancing those networks, build things at scale to be able to hit the price points going forward. So that's what back to your question, I believe we need to do, is to look at those 3 Ds, and this is going to come Easternisation from the East and the West, and we'll meet here to be able to actually make it real.
Thank you, Cedrik. Yeah, just a moment. So I think, what you've laid out is a certain trend, which is both Western and Eastern. Some amount of push will come from the East because it's entering, you can say, a mainstream, which is Western. So I wanted some perspectives on that. Is that something, Nabil, you wanted to talk about, or something else?
I wanted to build up on. I wanted to build up on the comments that were said, which I agree with, and I think.
And then address my question as well.
I will, yes. And I think what is really important here as we think about where we're going and how do we decarbonize, especially in our part of the world, where sometimes electricity is a byproduct of water. Having the energy mix is extremely important. I remember when I first, a few years back, when I used to talk to ministers of petroleum about renewable energy, my meeting would end in a nanosecond. Today, Minister of Petroleum are driving the whole discussion around renewable energy. But I think that mix is really important to have. We're seeing it here in the UAE with introduction of nuclear, with introduction of even coal. And what is important really is that the technology that is being developed by the manufacturers is allowing this mix to also address the renewable, the decarbonization. So when you think about the latest technology in gas turbines, where it's reached 64% efficiency. When you think about supercritical coal, even though coal is not going to be as much as we just heard before, I think the technology is improving to allow for this mix as renewable increases, and renewable is important. And I think to answer your question about, this part of the world is really important to bring the mix between the knowledge and the capability and the technology that you have had and being developed and expanded on even in the East, as well as the financing capability and the knowledge base that you have in the East that with its overcapacity is looking to go West. So I think clearly our part of the world is an important central point to help with this. But I think it's an opportunity where we could leverage each other with
Okay, great. So
with Eastern Europe, with Eastern Hemisphere as well as the Western Hemisphere.
no, I think that's an important point. What you're saying is that the driver for demand will be the East, but the East will be much more than that. It'll be more than that, perhaps as an innovator, as a thinker. I mean, clearly the Belt and Road Initiative is one of the most daring and innovative plans to come out of the world in the last 50 years. I think after the Marshall Plan, it is probably the most innovative plan to come out. It has come not from the West, but it's come from the East. So I want with that to turn to Song Dongsheng, who heads China Power. He's the president of PowerChina, where he has spent 3 decades of his career. And he will talk to us about the Belt and Road Initiative in an energy context and broadly in a sustainability context, as I understand. Over to you, Song.
Okay, thank you. Your Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It's my great pleasure to be here as a panelist.
Can you put your mouth closer in? It's a bit,
Okay, so today's this panel's topic is Easternisation. I want to talk about Easternisation and the Belt and Road Initiative. The first, it's difficult for me to fully agree with the topic Easternisation. So I'm from China. It's a company from East. So, but now I'm speaking in English, but my English is very poor. I would like to speak Chinese, but I don't. So this forum doesn't allow me to speak in Chinese. So, and also my business is in power and infrastructure. In my industry, all specifications, practice, framework are from the West. Chinese companies, we are doing internationalization, but for us, internationalization is almost equal to westernization. So, and yes, and also according to the topic, they said Easternization is bringing many potential opportunities for us. Yes, it's true. It's true. In last decade, there is a fast economic growth in Asia and Africa countries. It is bringing a lot of opportunities for both of companies from the West and East. For me, maybe the West companies, you have better chance. You have better chance than us. So, but the problem, the difference with what is your opportunities to these countries. For us, for Chinese, for the companies from East, we treat Asia countries, Africa countries is our most important market. And also we treat the risk in light of development. So I believe many West companies, of course, excluding GE and Siemens, they believe, they ignorate maybe this market. And also they believe this market very risky. So anyway, now I need to talk about the Belt and Road, okay? So that's my topic. I want to say something about my understanding of the Belt and Road initiative. So the core of the initiative is interconnectivity. Interconnectivity means connection between different regions, different countries, from UAE to Saudi, from Abu Dhabi to Dubai. Now necessarily connection with China. So if we can connect infrastructure, then we can connect our trading, our economic. Then the people and the government can have a good connectivity, can have a communication. Then we are sure our economy can grow fast and there is less conflicts. So I think this One Belt, One Road is a very good initiative for the world. Thank you very much. That's what I want to say. Thank you.
Good. I don't know if our panelists have any questions for Song, but I certainly have one. And my question is that without physical connectivity, without the transport corridors that connect different countries that are very poor within Asia and Africa, you can't have other forms of connectivity. You can't have people connectivity, you can't have power line connectivity, you can't have fiber bandwidth connectivity, you can't have people moving from one place to another. So in that sense, the Belt and Road as a transport infrastructure project is critical to achieving the ambitions of anyone who wants to do work in Asia. Now, you have one case study going on in a big way, which is Pakistan, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. I was wondering if you could talk a bit about the risks as well as the opportunities that offers.
Yes, it's a very good question when you talk about opportunity and risk. Yes, so I think this is a very fundamental issue when we talk about Easternization. So Pakistan has almost 200 million population. It's a big market for power. PowerChina just complete one big power plant in Pakistan. We not is EPC contract only. We are develop, but we work together with Qatar, a company from fund from Qatar. So that's a very, I think that's a very good example. So both of Chinese company, PowerChina and Qatar fund, we treat Pakistan is a good country to make our more than $2 billion investment there. So I hope companies from West, can treat these developing countries as very good opportunities. Thank you.
I would love to add to this. I mean, the main idea of Belt and Road, why I like it, is if you go back to the Silk Road, is as soon as you have countries trading, You learn from each other. Might it be the Italians learning about how to make noodles or silk or gunpowder or lots of other things. So, but you're right, in order to do this, you need to build basic infrastructures. You need power, transport, and communication, which are the three main drivers of the Belt and Road initiatives. And we participate, as Siemens, for example, we're part of a huge project in Pakistan of 1.3 billion gigawatt, which we built up together with a Chinese EPC to bring power to Punjab. Or we built, in Egypt is less of Belt and Road, but we did the same in Egypt, in which we built a huge power environment, saving the economy $1.4 billion per year. So the whole idea is how do you bring infrastructure so that the countries along this line can prosper, so that everybody prospers. And that's the idea of Belt and Road. It's not about China going to the world, it's about bringing countries closer and connecting them so that trade corridors can happen, which used to happen thousands of years ago.
Yeah. Yes, I'm fully agree with you. Yeah.
So it's I think a question that this raises for me is, what does it take to succeed? You know, can one just go into Pakistan, for example, and say, here, we're going to build you a power station and it should work? Because, you know, if you look at the experience of many investors in these countries, they faced immense risks and often poor returns. So what does it take to succeed? I'm going to turn now to Nabil, whose long career with GE. He is the president and CEO of GE for the Middle East, North America, and Turkey.
North Africa.
North Africa.
Not yet.
Sorry. And I believe 35 years of experience in GE, so long career, a graduate of Syracuse University, where I received admission, but I didn't go. May I turn over to you for some remarks?
Look, you asked what is the strategy for that, and I want to build up on the discussion that we just had before. I think the interconnectivity that you mentioned is extremely important, and the interconnectivity needs to be at different points. So for us, you know, when you talk about Easternization, this is not something new. You know, we have been in the Eastern Hemisphere, in China and in Japan and Korea and India for many, many years, because we felt there is the opportunity over there at that time. And when you go into a country, you got to think about not just how do I sell a product in a market, but to say I have a market, what does it mean to us and to the stakeholders, and how can we develop this partnership with the stakeholders? And when you develop this partnership with the stakeholders, you're looking at just beyond just providing a product. You're looking at how do you address the energy security and the food security and water security? How do you address the efficiency of the government to respond to social economic needs of people, such as healthcare, such as, you know, reliable 24-hour electricity that reaches everybody? And also, as we heard from the presentation earlier, how do you also help create jobs for the young people, which means localizing also products, which means helping with training and development, which means developing the relationship, you know, that you are part of the fabric. So that's the first step. And when you do that, and you do that in different places, and you're part of the fabric, and you're being a global company like we are, we can do that interconnectivity. And we've got great successes with that, and great successes as we had with China. My friend here mentioned Pakistan. That was a follow-up to a win that we have had in Pakistan with Chinese contractors as well. So we're all on the same strategy as well. You know, we just had a big win also here in the UAE, putting not only solar power plants, but also the supercritical high-efficiency coal plant in partnership with the Chinese. And when you're part of the fabric, you're leveraging the resources that you have in great skill sets as the EPC skill set that China has, but also the financing that you can draw on. And I want to also stress that it's not only about China, but the same is in Korea, the same is in Japan, and the same is in India, and they all have these resources available, and it's a matter of how are you local in all these different places to make the interconnection among themselves.
Great. So any comments on that from our panelists? I'm going to Yes, His
Well,
Excellency.
let me touch on certain points. First of all, I'd like to welcome you all here in Abu Dhabi. And I think this is what's happening on, or what's planned to happen on the Belt and Road, or what you call it, the Silk Road. It's actually connectivity. Now we are having here people talking about sustainability. We're having the whole world listening to what's happening in Abu Dhabi right now for those couple of days that yet to come. We've been seeing how Abu Dhabi being actually the capital of energy when it comes to innovation, when it comes to renewables, when it comes to even breaking the record of the best technology ever on the sustainability. I'd like to go and say and talk about maybe Mike Tyson's strategy. Yes, you have to have a plan, but also you need to learn how to avoid bunches. And also learn from those bunches that you may face. And I think whether it is a Silk Road or actually us sitting here together, we need to fully utilize this knowledge sharing and say what is the best for the land? What is the best for the future that can actually sustain supplying the energy on the most economic way that could actually leave beyond something for the yet generation to actually build on. I would just raise the hat up for what Abu Dhabi have done when it comes to the investment, where they put all their investment on the young generation. We've seen today how remarkable, distinguished, young talented, whether in Abu Dhabi or also helped by Abu Dhabi elsewhere in the world, to actually become connected. It's not about what is it for them, worse or bad for us. It's all about us working and living in the same planet and actually do something for the next generation. I believe there's supposed to be no boundaries on technologies, on the know-how. The best ever investment need to be happening on the generation of education and also delegation of those youth to actually make the decision, because they'll make a decision with all proudness. I think this is my comment. We see things that happening in a different form of connectivity. One is Silk Road. The other is just this meeting and this gathering that we are having in Abu Dhabi.
Thank you. That was Excellency Awaidha Al-Marar, Minister of State for Energy of the Department of Energy of the UAE and our host for this whole event. I wanted to ask you something. You just talked about the importance of doing things for the younger generation.
Yes.
And giving them the space to grow as being a core value that's driving Abu Dhabi forward. I'm not going to argue with that, but I'm going to ask you a little provocative question, if I might. Were we not doing that 20 years ago?
Sorry?
20 years, 2 decades ago, what were we doing that was different?
You know that I'm barely hearing you when you started. Can you repeat that again?
Yes, my question is that you talked about the importance of doing things for the younger generation, giving them the space to grow, to innovate. And my question to you is that different from what we did? I mean, I'm now in my 3rd generation, I'm a grandfather. When I was a father, I think I did things for my children as well. And so did the state. So what has changed between yesterday and today?
I'm not talking about the level of father giving a space to young children, no. I'm talking about young generation who are well educated and actually are in position to make decisions. And I don't want to sit and list those people who are actually done a remarkable job on their position as from the government side, whether at the minister level or CEO's level.
So your point is the state must do more than it's done before.
Yes.
So it wasn't doing enough earlier in terms of education and healthcare.
No,
I mean, we're talking of, say, if you look at China, this is a country that by 1980 already had 100% literacy, 100% healthcare. So it looked after its young generation for the future. Do you see my point? I'm saying this has always been there. Why will it, if we take a focus on the younger generation, will it really make a big difference now?
Yes, it will make a big difference. And I think if you just go and look at the status of how the growth is happening on the young generation. We've just been listening to the increase on those young generation who need to be well educated, taken care of, and also given responsibility to make decisions for their better life in the future.
Can I build upon this? Because I actually agree with His Excellency. We borrow the world always from our children. That's the way it works. And if you look back at the development of Dubai, it's an amazing development which has happened, which built an infrastructure to be able to have the impact on the world, which has now. I think we were hearing that there's another billion people, young people which will be born. So we're just more of us. There's less resources and more of us. So we have to learn, we have to educate to be able to take technology and apply it with economic sense to the problems of this world. So yes, you're right that every generation is borrowing the world from its children, but every generation has to rethink what it has to do for its children to enable them, to empower them, and to really sort of go in the right direction. That's the way I was looking at it. And I applaud. I mean, I found it extremely good to have young talent opening up this sustainability week, because it really shows of what we are actually about to do and what we need to do.
Any comments?
Look, I think I had mentioned earlier that it's our obligation as well as global companies, as we think locally, to address what are the needs of the leadership in any country, and how can we be part of that fabric. And I mentioned that, creating jobs, training, development, and building capability in the country that focuses also on technology, on R&D, and on intellectual property. I think this part of the world has great capability. There's a huge investment that is being made on the education side. And I think this part of the world will also get to make sure that the future generation will be aware of it. And I agree with His Excellency's point. I think we need to continue this focus on education. And this is the reason why we do a lot of we started leadership programs here in the region. We worked with universities on developing the local talent. We also are having the network, the global network, to make sure that the local talent expands even beyond. The one thing I would say about the youth is that most of the youth in our part of the world, the majority of them continue to go west for their education, whether it is Europe or the United States. And I think as we think about Easternization and the focus and the importance of the East, that there should be a lot more focus on education in the eastern part of the hemisphere.
That's a great point. So so I think we've had a good discussion so far, and unless you all have any points to raise, I'm going to end with a question. I'd like each of you to just spend half a minute responding to it, and that'll be the end of the session. So the question is, if you look at 2050, so roughly 30 years plus from today, do you see, in terms of how investments, demand, and innovation are structured, in how people live their lifestyles, in what kinds of healthcare they receive, the role of new technologies. Today, if we look at it, it's 90% the West. In terms of ideas, technologies, business models, governance structures. How will that be in 2050? Nabil, you're on.
I think with globalization, with digitization, with the connectivity that everybody has, and with the focus on the need of growing population, innovation is going to be everywhere, because people have access to the technology, have access to the tools, have access to the financing. If you take a look at the brain power, I think it's going to shift a lot more to the east than it was to the west. And I think, when I talked about the future of the new generation and working with the universities, I think the big question for us that we have to address is what is the future of work going to be? And what is the future of innovation going to be so that we support the education system to be ready for that?
Okay, so brain power shifting.
Yeah, I mean, I'm an engineer and I look at numbers. If you look at the numbers of Asia, it definitely will move to Asia in the Middle East just because of the amount of education, money, focus, and development which is happening there. And we, as Siemens, are preparing to shift it. I mean, we're shifting large part of our R&D also to the region, here this region, and also to Asia. And I believe that it's going to be good for everyone. So it's not a fear, it's not somebody's going to win, somebody's going to lose. It's just there's more people here which are well educated. And if we enable them to have electricity, have communication, and have a good education, they will be successful in innovating.
So not Easternization, but globalization.
I'm a big globalization.
Okay, let's move on to Song.
So, PowerChina is a business, core business is in power industry. So we don't need to wait 30 years. Now, power revolution comes. Who are the pioneers? They are Aqua, they are Master. So from Middle East. So after 30 years, I think Middle East companies, Chinese, India, GE, Siemens, we need to work together more closely. So that's something we are expecting. Thank you.
So that's another vote for globalization. Excellency, you have the last word.
I think we made it easy for us. We had a plan working with the Minister of Energy to actually set our plan until 2050. That says clearly fossil fuels, 50% renewables. For us, this is where we need to draw what is the best plan for us. And I'm sure we'll be also monitoring and looking at the radars of the development that looks after sustainable. We've already committed to that with the whole UAE, and we are to that plan.
So joining the mainstream. Okay, very good. Thank you so much. Please join me in giving them a round of applause.